White House announcing this morning that the president will sign an executive order targeting financial institutions that do transactions with Russia's military. Our next guest wrote an op-ed in today's Financial Times about the Treasury's effort to target the Kremlin's finances. Let's talk to U.S. Treasury Deputy Secretary Wally Adeyemo. And we understand the EO now, the executive order, Mr. Secretary, but tell us what was going on and what this addresses. I don't think, not everyone is really up to speed on what's been happening with some of these financial institutions. Can you give us some background?
Well, it's good to be here with you today. And as you mentioned, the executive order will be signed today that gives us the ability to target these foreign financial institutions. And for the last 2 years, in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we put in place a set of sanctions and export controls to stop Russia from getting access to the goods and technology they need to fight their war. What the Kremlin did was they charged their intelligence services with forming cutout companies and other things to try and hide their purchases of these goods from selected third countries. And they're not going through big companies in these countries. They're going through small firms to get things like microelectronics and machine tools and engine parts. But all of these companies still have to use the financial system. So what we've said today, because of the president's executive order, is that if you're a financial institution in one of these countries, you have to ensure that your customers are not selling goods that are helping Russia's war effort. And if you can't ensure that, stop allowing that company to sell things into Russia. And if you don't, we now have a tool that allows us to target you.
I mean, we tried our best efforts with oil and to prevent Russia from benefiting from exports, and it seems like things flow downhill. It seems like it goes through the cracks, and it's happening with this. And is this likely to be effective, Secretary?
Our view is that it is going to be effective, but the thing that you know well about sanctions is that you're continuing having to adjust to a country that is also adjusting. And you mentioned what we've done with oil with regard to our price cap. And what Russia did was, because we said that you can't use G7 services unless you sell oil for under $60, they decided then to buy their own ships. And they invested in tankers, not tanks. Today, we've seen the price of Russian oil come down, and they're making 40% less from selling oil than they did a year ago because of the actions we've taken, and they're paying 75% more for their military budget. So any company's balance sheet, that's not a good ratio, and our goal is to continue to drive that in the wrong direction so that Russia's economy continues to get smaller and they have less resources to fight their war of choice in Ukraine.
Geographically, where are these companies that you're targeting? Are they are there concentrations in certain countries that are not cooperating with the United States on trying to stop these things? And how much teeth will the executive orders have? Where are they mostly concentrated, Wally?
So the trade data shows us that much of Russian trade today is going through countries like China and other countries all over the world. But what we found is that in many of these countries, be it China, Turkey, the UAE, or any countries in the region near Russia, we found that most of their financial institutions have been following our sanctions because they know that doing business with the United States matters more to them than doing business with a Russian economy that's getting smaller every day. And we expect that to continue. What this executive order gives us the ability to do is to target smaller institutions that may be unwilling to or wittingly trying to get around our sanctions, and to make very clear to them that they also have a choice. They can continue to do this business with Russia, or they can continue to have access to the U.S. financial system. I think one of the most important things to point out is that most financial institutions around the world have stopped doing this type of business with Russia for a long time. That's why foreign direct investment in Russia is getting smaller and is decreasing every day. Where, on the other hand, you've seen the growth of our economy despite the challenges that we've had from Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
So it doesn't really matter whether you get the cooperation of the government, the Turkish government, or the UAE. You can do this just with almost a carrot and stick approach. Would you say that you're not getting cooperation from where the countries where these firms are domiciled?
So what we've seen is a great deal of cooperation from the countries where these firms are domiciled, but what we know is that the Russian intelligence services are continuously trying to change their approach in ways that would allow them to be able to try and get around our sanctions.
Does that include crypto, Wally?
It does, and it involves every firm. But what I'd say is that these governments have worked with us, but what this tool gives us the ability to do is exactly what you said, is that in cases where we can't get cooperation, we now have a tool that allows us to act. And the truth is that this is not just 2 or 3 countries, although the data shows that a majority of it's happening in certain places. It's happening around the world. What Russia has become very good at is trying to evade our sanctions. And what this tool says is that if you're a financial institution, you need to take steps to make sure that you are not being used by these firms to get around our sanctions.
Okay.